The meeting wasn't announced. It never was. 3 cars arrived separately. Different routes, different times, same destination. A building that didn't exist on maps. No signs, no logos, just concrete, glass, and silence engineered into architecture. Inside, the room waited. The woman arrived last, not escorted, not searched. The doors opened for her before she touched them. That was the first admission of defeat. She stepped inside, her child secure against her chest. The room went still. Every conversation stopped. Every screen froze. "You shouldn't have brought him," one voice said from the shadows. She didn't turn. "You shouldn't have asked for me," she replied calmly. She took a seat at the center of the table without being invited. Power shifted. Not dramatically, inevitably. "You're forcing exposure," another voice said. "This was never meant to be public." She smiled faintly. "Neither was I," she replied. A murmur rippled through the room. One man leaned forward. "You know what this child represents. Bloodlines like this destabilize systems." She looked at him directly. "Systems that fear children," she said, "deserve to collapse." Silence followed. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Necessary. A screen lit up behind them. Old footage. Old agreements. Old lies. They didn't ask how she had it. They already knew. "You're threatening everything," someone snapped. She shook her head. "No," she corrected. "I'm reminding you of what you buried." The baby stirred. A soft sound. The room froze again. Every powerful figure present instinctively lowered their voice. Even they didn't understand why. "This isn't about revenge," she continued. "It's about choice. Something you removed years ago." "You walked away," a voice accused. "I was pushed," she replied. "There's a difference." One man finally said what everyone was thinking. "What do you want?" She leaned back. "Nothing," she said. They stared at her. "That's what scares you," she continued. "You don't control people who want nothing from you." A pause. Then another voice. "If we expose everything," it said, "there will be consequences." She nodded. "Yes," she said, "for everyone." The tension thickened. Options vanished. Threats felt small now. "You're leaving us no room," someone said. She stood. "You never left me any," she replied. She adjusted the strap holding her son. "This ends one of 2 ways," she said calmly. "You accept that the future doesn't belong to you alone." She took a step toward the door. "Or," she added without turning, "history repeats itself, this time with witnesses." No one stopped her. No one spoke. The doors opened. Outside, the city breathed, unaware, still normal, still fragile. She paused under the open sky. For the first time in years, she felt the weight lift slightly. Inside the room, one man finally spoke. "She crossed the line." Another replied quietly. "No," he said, "she erased it." That night, systems updated quietly. Protocols changed. Files unlocked. Not because they wanted to, because resistance now carried risk. In her apartment, the woman placed her son in his crib. He opened his eyes briefly. Calm. Watching. She smiled. "They're afraid now," she whispered. "That means you're safe. For the moment." Outside, the city lights flickered. Somewhere deep beneath it all, something old had cracked. And nothing built on silence survives that sound. The world didn't collapse. That was the problem. It adjusted. Quietly, quickly, uneasily. Within 24 hours, things that had never moved shifted. Committees reconvened, emergency clauses resurfaced. Old safeguards were suddenly described as outdated, not removed, reworded. That's how power survived exposure, by pretending evolution. In newsrooms across the country, editors argued in hushed voices. We can't say it directly, but we can't ignore it either. Then say nothing and everything at the same time. Stories ran with careful phrasing, sources close to internal circles, unverified but credible, historical relevance re-examined. The public felt it. They always did. Something was wrong, and no one was explaining it. The woman watched the coverage from her apartment, muted, captions only. She rocked her son gently, her eyes scanning words instead of faces. "They're dancing around it," she murmured. The baby slept, unbothered, unimpressed. Her phone rang constantly now. Numbers without names, voices that spoke carefully, offers disguised as concern. She answered none of them. Silence had changed sides. Across the city, the man from the meeting sat in a darkened office. He hadn't slept. "She didn't expose us," someone said over speakerphone. "She destabilized expectations." "That's worse," he replied. "What's the plan?" He leaned back slowly. There is no plan for someone who refuses leverage. Files long sealed were now under review. Not opened publicly, but not protected either. That limbo terrified the people who knew what was inside. Careers were suddenly reconsidered. Alliances felt fragile. Old favors stopped being returned. Fear didn't scream, it recalculated. The woman stepped outside for the first time that evening. No cameras now, no reporters, just distance. She liked it better this way. A neighbor passed by and smiled politely. No recognition, no suspicion. She returned the smile. Power, she had learned, moved best when unseen. Later that night, an encrypted message finally came through. Not a threat, not an offer, a warning. They're not unified anymore. She read it twice, then deleted it. That was inevitable, she whispered. In another building, a different conversation unfolded. If we push back, we validate her. If we comply, we admit guilt. Then stall, someone suggested. Delay creates forgetfulness. Silence followed. "That won't work this time," a quieter voice said. "Why?" "Because she didn't give them answers," the voice replied. "She gave them curiosity." The next morning, something unprecedented happened. A resignation. No scandal, no explanation, just a name stepping down for personal reasons. Then another, then a third. Patterns form faster than lies. The woman felt it before she saw it. The pressure had changed direction. They weren't advancing anymore. They were containing damage. She adjusted her son's blanket. "Good," she said softly. "Containment means fear." But fear makes mistakes, and mistakes leave trails. By evening, a leaked document surfaced online. Redacted, but not enough. It referenced an initiative, a bloodline, a contingency that should never have existed. It was gone within minutes. Too late. The woman's phone vibrated. A single message from a secure channel. You were right. They can't stop it now. She closed her eyes briefly. I know, she whispered. She stood by the window that night, city lights reflecting in the glass. Somewhere out there, people were connecting dots. Not the whole picture, not yet, but enough to realize the frame was wrong. Her son stirred. She picked him up and held him close. They're learning, she said quietly. Too slowly, but they're learning. He yawned, unconcerned with legacies or consequences. That was the point. Far away, the man from the meeting watched the city skyline from his office. She didn't break the system, someone said beside him. No, he replied. She reminded it that it was built by people. He turned off the lights. For the first time in decades, the future felt uncertain, and uncertainty terrified those who once controlled everything. The woman closed the curtains, not to hide, to rest. Tomorrow would be louder, and silence, she knew now, was no longer hers to carry alone. The first mistake wasn't the leak. It was the denial. Within hours of the document disappearing from the internet, official statements flooded in, measured, polished, empty. There is no evidence to support misinterpretations of outdated material, baseless speculation. The public had heard those phrases before, too many times. Forums lit up, screenshots reappeared, cached pages resurfaced. People who had never cared about power structures suddenly cared very much, because the story wasn't abstract anymore. There was a woman, there was a child, and there was fear where confidence used to be. The woman watched it unfold quietly. No commentary, no posts, no statements. She fed her son, changed him, held him while the world debated his existence like a rumor. They still think this is about information, she murmured. The baby blinked slowly, unimpressed. Inside a closed session miles away, voices rose. This is getting away from us. We should have acted sooner. You wanted silence. This is what silence creates. One man slammed his hand on the table. She planned this. No, another replied. She survived us. That distinction mattered. The fractures widened. Old allies stopped answering calls. Legal teams requested distance. Security protocols were quietly downgraded, pending review. Fear had moved from the edges to the center. A journalist finally asked the wrong question on live television. If there's nothing to hide, she said calmly, why are so many people resigning? The anchor froze. The producer's voice cut in. The segment ended abruptly. Clips spread everywhere. The woman smiled for the first time that day. They're losing coordination, she said softly. Her phone buzzed again. A new message. Someone wants to talk. Off the record. She didn't respond. They always wanted to talk once control slipped. That night she dreamed. Not of the past, of the future. A child walking without guards. A name spoken without fear. A world where legacy didn't mean obligation. She woke before dawn. The baby was already awake, staring at the ceiling, watching, learning. Across the city, the man from the meeting stared at a wall of screens, graphs trending upward, sentiment shifting, trust eroding. This is no longer containable, someone said. He nodded slowly. She didn't light a fire, he replied. She opened a door. A vote was proposed. quietly, desperately. Not to punish her, to distance themselves from what they once protected. Self-preservation always arrived late. By midday, another name stepped down. Then another. This time, no excuses were offered. Silence again, but not the protective kind, the exposed kind. The woman stepped outside with her son later that afternoon. No cameras followed, no cars lingered. People were busy arguing online, connecting theories, demanding answers. She walked freely. That alone was a victory. A stranger passed her on the sidewalk, paused, then nodded respectfully. Not recognition, acknowledgement. She nodded back. Her phone vibrated one last time that day. A single sentence. They're choosing who to sacrifice. She exhaled slowly. That was inevitable too, she whispered. That evening, a panel was announced. Independent, transparent, temporary. Words meant to calm. They never did. The woman closed a door behind her and locked it, not out of fear, out of habit. She held her son close. They're scrambling now, she said softly. When powerful people scramble, they make noise. The baby yawned. Outside, the city buzzed. Arguments, questions, anger. The truth hadn't fully arrived yet, but it was close enough to cast a shadow. And shadows, once noticed, are impossible to ignore. The announcement came at exactly 9 a.m., too precise to be accidental. A press conference. A single spokesperson. Carefully selected language, the kind designed not to explain, but to end conversations. We acknowledge past procedural oversights, the spokesperson said, eyes steady, voice rehearsed. An internal review has identified individual failures that do not reflect the values of our institutions. Individual failures. The phrase hit like a signal flare. Someone had been chosen. Within minutes, a name began circulating, then a face. Mid-level, old enough to know better, powerful enough to matter, but not enough to fight back. Forms exploded. So that's it? They think this fixes everything? They're burying it again. The woman watched from her kitchen table, muted, as always. Her son lay beside her, wrapped in a soft blanket, fists clenched like he already sensed tension in the air. They're trying to close the door, she said quietly, but they don't realize it's already off its hinges. Her phone buzzed. This time she answered. Yes. A familiar voice spoke. They're offering immunity, it said, if you stay silent, permanently. She smiled, no humor in it. They still don't understand, she replied. Understand what? That silence was never my weakness. The voice hesitated. They'll destroy him in the narrative, it warned. They'll turn your child into a threat. The woman looked down at her son. He already is, she said calmly, to people who fear the future. She ended the call. Across the city, the chosen scapegoat sat alone in an office watching the same broadcast. His phone rang non-stop. No one answered him. That was how he knew. He had been traded. Documents began surfacing again, not leaked, released, carefully, strategically. Old emails, meeting notes, redacted timelines that suddenly made sense. The story no longer needed speculation. It had structure now. In the control room of the narrative, panic replaced strategy. This wasn't supposed to happen. She wasn't supposed to have access. We underestimated her. Someone whispered the truth no one wanted to hear. She planned for this years ago. The woman packed a small bag that afternoon, not to flee, to move forward. There was a difference. She placed the gold pendant inside carefully, not as protection, as proof. By evening, the panel announced earlier was already under scrutiny. Members questioned, conflicts exposed, credibility eroded before it could even begin. People were learning faster now, too fast to manage. Her doorbell rang. She didn't jump. She already knew who it was. The man from the meeting stood outside. No guards this time. No confidence either. "We need to talk," he said. She stepped aside. He didn't sit, didn't pace, just stood there, looking older than before. "You forced a reckoning," he said, "one that won't be clean." She nodded. Truth never is. They'll retaliate. They already tried. He looked at the baby. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "some of us didn't want it to be this way." She met his eyes. "And yet," she replied, "you let it happen." Silence answered for him. Outside, protests began forming. Not violent, not organized, just people standing with signs that asked questions no one could answer anymore. That scared institutions more than anger ever could. The man finally spoke again. "What do you want now?" She didn't hesitate. "I want my child to grow up in a world where his name isn't a secret." The man nodded slowly. "That world won't forgive you." She smiled faintly. "I'm not asking it to." That night, a final document went live. Not anonymous, not leaked, authenticated, time-stamped, irrefutable. It didn't name everyone. It didn't need to. It showed enough. The woman held her son as alerts flooded every screen. Gasps, denials, silence breaking everywhere at once. She kissed his forehead. "This is the loud part," she whispered. He slept through it, as he should. Somewhere deep inside the systems that once controlled everything, a switch flipped. Not to end the story, to acknowledge it. And that acknowledgement, more than any exposure, changed everything. It happened faster than anyone expected. Not because the truth was sudden, but because the world had been waiting. At 7:42 a.m., the document was everywhere. Not mirrored, not copied, confirmed. Major outlets stopped using words like alleged and unverified. They replaced them with something far more dangerous: confirmed by independent sources. That single phrase changed everything. Markets reacted first, not crashing, hesitating. That pause alone signaled fear. Boards convened emergency meetings, advisors stopped whispering and started arguing, because now the question wasn't, "Is this real?" It was, "How long have we been lying?" The woman watched none of it live. She sat on the floor of her living room, her son in her arms, sunlight spilling through the window. She had done what she needed to do. Now the world could do the rest. Across the city, a network anchor broke from the teleprompter. "This story," she said carefully, "forces us to reconsider how much of our history was curated." Her producer didn't stop her. That was new. Inside government buildings, conversations turned blunt. Who signed off on this? Who knew? Who still knows more than we do? No one wanted to be the last person holding secrets. The man from the meeting sat alone now. No aides, no advisors, no phone calls coming in. Just silence. The wrong kind. He stared at the same wall where screens once glowed. "She did it," he whispered. Not with anger, with awe. Crowds gathered by mid-morning. Not mobs. Families. Students. workers on lunch breaks. They held signs with questions written in plain language. Who decides our future? Why were we never told? Who benefits from silence? Those signs terrified people more than slogans ever could. The woman stepped outside again. No disguise, no rush. Just a walk. People recognized her now, not by face, but by posture, by calm, by refusal to bow. A path opened instinctively. No one touched her. No one shouted. Someone whispered, "That's her." Someone else replied, "That's the mother." Her phone rang. She answered. "They're asking for testimony," the voice said. "Public, on record." She closed her eyes briefly. "I won't speak for myself," she replied. "I already did." A pause. "Then for who?" She looked down at her son. "For him," she said, "and for everyone who never got the chance." By afternoon, arrests began. Not sweeping, selective, symbolic, but even symbols crumble when the foundation cracks. A former official tried to flee, stopped at the airport, cameras everywhere. That image alone rewrote years of confidence. In classrooms, teachers paused lessons to answer questions they had never expected students to ask. In offices, conversations drifted from deadlines to disbelief. In homes, people argued, then listened, then argued less. The truth didn't unify, but it clarified. That evening, the woman stood before a small group of microphones. No podium, no statement prepared. She held her son. "I stayed silent once," she said, "and it cost more than I can explain." Cameras clicked. "I won't do that again." No more, no less. She stepped away. Behind her, the city erupted, not in chaos, but in noise. Questions, debates, demands. The system hadn't fallen, but it had lost its greatest weapon, control of the narrative. Later that night, the man from the meeting watched her brief appearance replay on every channel. "She didn't accuse," someone beside him said quietly. "She didn't need to," he replied. "She let the truth stand on its own." In her apartment, the woman placed her son gently in his crib. He stirred, eyes opening for a moment. Calm. Aware. She leaned close. "They can't take this back," she whispered. "They can't put it away again." He blinked, then slept. Outside, sirens echoed, not in panic, but in motion. The world was adjusting, uncomfortably, irreversibly. And for the first time since the night she gave birth in silence, the truth spoke loudly enough to be heard everywhere. The loudest moment always passes first, after the cameras shut off, after the statements stop updating, after the outrage finds somewhere else to land. What remains is quieter, heavier, more honest. Weeks passed, not cleanly, but steadily. Investigations turned into hearings. Hearings turned into reforms, some real, some cosmetic. People learned which promises were meant to last and which were meant to buy time. The woman watched it all from a distance. She had learned long ago that proximity to power distorts perspective. Distance brought clarity. Her days were simple now. Feedings, sleepless nights, short walks where strangers no longer stared but nodded politely. Not reverence, recognition. That mattered more. The child grew quickly, alert,
curious, unusually calm. Doctors noted it quietly. She smiled and said nothing. Some truths didn't need documentation. The man from the meeting resigned 3 months later. No announcement, no farewell, just absence. That, too, told a story. The world didn't become fair. It became aware. That was the real shift. People asked harder questions now, accepted fewer half answers. Silence had lost its authority. One afternoon, the doctor from the hospital visited. He brought no files, no questions, just a small gift. "I wanted to see how you were," he said. She nodded. "We're good," she replied, and she meant it. He hesitated. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. She looked at her son playing quietly on the floor. "No," she said. "I regret waiting."
News cycles moved on. They always did. But something lingered beneath the surface. A memory, a reference point. Whenever institutions spoke too confidently, someone would say, "Remember what happened when she spoke." That was enough. At night, she sometimes stood by the window again, not watching the city, listening to it. The sound had changed. Less certainty, more voices. Messy. Alive. Her son tugged at the gold pendant one evening. She unclasped it and placed it in his hand. One day, she knew, he would ask. Not yet. For now, it was just something that felt familiar. She no longer feared what he might become. She feared only one thing now, a world that might forget. So she chose something radical. She lived openly, not loudly, just truthfully. Years later, people would argue about what really happened. They would debate motives, rewrite timelines, turn moments into myths. That was fine. The facts were already free. The woman tucked her son into bed one quiet night. He looked up at her and smiled. No legacy in his eyes, no burden, just trust. She turned off the light, and for the first time in a very long time, silence felt earned. Time doesn't heal everything, but it does reveal what was real. 5 years passed. Not quietly, just naturally. The world moved on the way it always did. Forward, unevenly, pretending it had learned more than it had. But some things never returned to how they were, and everyone knew it. The woman lived in a smaller city now. Not hidden, not spotlighted, just present. She worked in a place where her name mattered less than her consistency, where people knew her by routine, morning coffee, afternoon walks, the way she listened more than she spoke. That was intentional. Visibility had a cost. Normalcy was a gift. Her son ran ahead of her in the park, laughing at nothing in particular. He was fearless in the way children are before the world teaches them caution. Other parents noticed him, not because he was special, but because he was calm, centered, as if noise passed around him instead of through him. "Your kid's different," a woman once said casually on a bench. The mother smiled. "They all are," she replied. And that was true. In the wider world, consequences lingered. Institutions rebranded, policies gained new names, language softened where it once hardened. But every time silence was used to avoid accountability, someone remembered. There was a before and an after. In journalism schools, a case study appeared. Not titled with names, just an event. The day silence failed. Students debated it endlessly. That pleased her. Debate meant thinking. Her son asked questions now, not the hard ones, not yet, but close. "Why do people look at us sometimes?" he asked once, swinging his legs from a bench. She considered her answer carefully. Because they're remembering something, she said. Did we do something? No, she replied. They did. He accepted that and went back to his game. Children often do. The gold pendant stayed in a drawer, waiting. She knew the day would come. She wasn't afraid of it anymore. Elsewhere, the last remnants of the old system clung to relevance. Think tanks published op-eds. Former leaders gave interviews filled with regret-shaped excuses. Few listened. Power without mystery had lost its edge. One evening, the man from the meeting appeared in a documentary. Older, quieter. He spoke carefully. We believed silence was stability, he said. We were wrong. The clip went viral, not because it was shocking, because it was late. The mother watched none of it. She was busy helping her son with a puzzle on the living room floor. Does this go here? He asked. She nodded. Try it, she said. He did. It fit. That night, after he fell asleep, she stood by the window again, not to watch, to reflect. She thought of the hospital room, the quiet pain, the choice she made before anyone else noticed. She didn't feel pride. She felt peace. The world hadn't become better, but it had become less certain. And uncertainty, she had learned, was where change lived. Years from now, her son would hear stories, some accurate, some exaggerated, some completely wrong. She wouldn't rush to correct them. Truth didn't need constant defense, just space. She closed the curtains and turned out the lights. In the other room, her son slept soundly, unburdened, unclaimed, free. And somewhere far beyond the reach of old systems and new narratives, silence existed again. Not as a weapon, not as a shield, but as rest. Some stories don't end. They circle back. 10 years after the night everything changed, the hospital still stood. Renovated, rebranded, reassured. New policies hung on the walls. Words like transparency and ethics printed in clean fonts. Most people passed them without noticing. She didn't. She stood in the lobby now, older, calmer, holding her son's hand. Not visiting, passing through. The boy looked around curiously. "Why are we here?" he asked. She smiled softly. "Because this is where you were born," she said. He frowned, thinking. "It looks normal." She nodded. "That's the point." They paused near the hallway that once led to room 417. The number was gone now, renumbered, redesigned. But memory doesn't follow signage. She felt it anyway. The quiet pain, the indifference, the choice. Her son tugged at her hand. "Were you scared?" he asked suddenly. She considered lying, then didn't. "Yes," she said, "but I was more afraid of staying quiet." He nodded slowly, processing. That mattered. They left the hospital without ceremony. No one recognized them. No cameras, no whispers. The world had moved on. That, too, mattered. Years later, her son would speak publicly for the first time, not as a symbol, not as a survivor, as himself. He would refuse introductions that mentioned his birth. He would say calmly, "My mother didn't give me a legacy, she gave me a choice." People would remember that line. But that was later. For now, they walked into sunlight, the city busy, ordinary, alive. That night, the woman opened the drawer and took out the gold pendant. She placed it in her son's hand. He turned it over, curious. "What is it?" he asked. She knelt beside him. "It's a reminder," she said, "that silence can protect or imprison." He looked up.
How do you know which one it is? She smiled. You listen to why you're being quiet. He closed his fingers around it, didn't put it on, just held it. That was enough. In time, historians would argue about her choices. Activists would claim her. Institutions would reframe her. She would belong to none of it. Her son would grow into a world that still struggled, still failed, still tried to control outcomes it couldn't predict. But it would also be a world where silence had been challenged once, and that challenge couldn't be undone. On the anniversary of his birth, she returned home alone, sat in the quiet. No speeches, no reflection pieces, just a moment. She breathed, and for the first time in years, didn't feel the need to remember. Because the story was no longer behind her, it was walking forward, choosing. Somewhere, a new mother would give birth quietly, but this time the silence wouldn't mean invisibility, it would mean strength. And that was the truth no one could erase.